Good evening, Columbus community. It is Board President Adair, and I am calling the July 21st special meeting of the Columbus Board of Education to order. Mr. Treasurer, please call the roll.
President Adair.
Present.
Ms. Beckerly.
Present.
Mr. Brown. Ms. Beckerly.
Present.
Mr. Brown. Eric, Mr. Brown.
There it is. I'm sorry. I'm here.
Mr. Cole. Dr. Pierce.
Present.
Mr. Ragland.
Here.
Vice President Reyes.
Here.
You have a quorum, Madam President.
Thank you so much. And it is our anticipation that Board Member Cole will be joining us momentarily. So we will have a full board present during this special meeting. To those of our community that are watching, I just want to say right up front, in this meeting, we will not be talking about anything associated with the reopening of schools this fall. So we still hope you tune in and watch and listen to our conversation. Good evening, Board Member Cole. Thank you. We will not be announcing anything new regarding the reopening. Look for further announcements soon from the superintendent. This meeting is a special meeting to continue our strategic planning with our consultant from the Council of Great City Schools, AJ Crable. And so that is really our agenda for the evening. So board members, we are mostly through our agenda already. We've called the meeting to order. I will ask for an adoption of the agenda. We will then turn it over to AJ to lead us through some strategic planning, and then we will adjourn for the evening.
I move we adopt the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
President Adair.
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Cole.
Yes.
Dr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mr. Ragland.
Yes.
Vice President Reyes.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. And so I will turn it over to AJ Crable from the Council of Great City Schools. Welcome, AJ.
Good evening. And as usual, thank you for having me. So our work tonight picks up where we left off at our last gathering, where you all have done a lot of homework. I've done a little bit of homework, and we'll go through that work tonight to finalize some of our next steps and begin to prepare you for the work that you'll be taking on over the next several months. This evening's conversation is really about community engagement and community outreach. When we talk about community engagement in this context, we'll be talking about meetings that you all are hosting and inviting the community to come to. When we talk about community outreach, we'll be talking about meetings that are happening out in the community that you all want to go and attend to get further input from folks who might not be able to make it to your community engagement meetings. Because you all will be doing much of this work, tonight begins the process of training you all to on what the message is that you all want. Part of my work over the last week has been interviewing each of you to get a sense of what you think that message should be. Missy's provided you with a document that provides a summary of what I heard in those meetings. And so we'll be walking through that document. So if you don't have the CCS Board Strategic Planning, Community Engagement and Outreach Guide nearby, you will want to get that document. And I do apologize for getting it to you late. I did not finish all the interviews as last week as I'd intended to. And so we'll work through that document. The other document that you should have is a spreadsheet that she shared with you that lists out the different organizations and groups in the community that you all collectively want to engage, want to include in your outreach process. And so we're also going to walk through that document. So if you have not yet pulled that up, you want to look into your email and find that document, because we'll be using that this evening as well. So let me give you all just a moment. And I'll check to see if a thumbs up if you have those two documents handy. Okay, I see. Looks like most of you do. All right. So let's start first with the spreadsheet because we'll be able to move quickly through that. So what this spreadsheet is a document that has all of your recommendations in it. I think most of the duplicates have been removed. There may be a few in there that were they'd be hard to catch. But this key stakeholder list is the full set that you all recommend be considered as part of your community outreach. Now, that being said, the reason I'm tentative about this list is because for outreach to be effective, at least 2 of you need to be present for it. And so with this list, what we need to do is go through it. And this is part of your homework from this meeting. My request is that you complete this homework and get it back to Misty by Friday at the absolute latest so that we can compile that and get it back to you. But the homework you'll need to do is go through the list and identify the groups that you are willing to be part of the 2 board member team that will go and lead the outreach session with that group. So what you all need to do, and we'll walk through the list here in a moment, but as we walk through it, keep in mind that your homework and that you'll need to get to Misty again by Friday at the latest is to go through and identify what are the groups that I'm willing to go out and be part of the 2-person board member team that is leading the outreach session with that group. And if there are any where there are not at least 2 board members signed up for, then those groups, organizations simply won't be included in the process. So you all have the freedom to include as many as you want or include as few as you want. But for it to be a board effort, not a board member effort, but a collective board effort, at least 2 of you will need to be willing to go and meet with that group. And so we'll know how many outreach sessions there are because by Friday we'll have a list and either there are 2 board members signed up to go and visit that group or not. We'll have a little bit of opportunity to calibrate and make adjustments later, but that will generally give us the list of where the board will be going. So with that as the understanding, let's step into the stakeholder list now, just so if you have any questions, you can get those answered so that you are able to do your homework over the next several days. So as we go through as we've got the stakeholder list open now, what, if any, questions do you have? What clarification do you need so that you can go and, using this list, put your name next to the ones that you're willing to personally go and lead the outreach session for and get it back to Misty by Friday? What questions do you have? Yes, Dr. Pierce.
Thank you so much. So my question is, where do we see natural partnerships already occurring? So for example, when I sent in the area commissions, my idea was that we meet with them regionally or we meet with as many of them as we can at one time. So where do we see natural collaboration and partnership with these organizations?
So when you think regionally, you're thinking like 5 or 6 regional meetings?
As opposed to going to visit each 21 area commissions.
So I can't remember who it was. Someone else had a thought for me while I was reaching out to you about how best to reach all the area commissions. Yeah, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I had the same idea, Dr. Pierce, about maybe even using one of the engagement exercises that we host and ask them to come to us. Or I know sometimes the Department of Neighborhoods gathers them and does training. So maybe that there is a way to just to get in on one of those meetings, but definitely collaborate a little more on that.
The excuse
I
me.
don't know
I'm
if you
sorry.
want me to call on people, AJ, or did you? did you want me to call on people like normal?
Oh, yeah,
Or do you want to handle that? Oh, okay.
No,
Board
please go
Member
for it.
Brown.
Great. With respect to the area commissions, well, with respect to all of this at this stage, these may all be virtual. And we're not going to be physically going out to very many groups to meet with them. And I think that changes our job a great deal and how we arrange these and schedule these. I think that to the extent possible with the area commissions, that we'd want to reach out to each one and try to get on the agenda of the area commission meeting. And I think that's doable. And one of us can reach out to the director or reach out to Toya or somebody else there to set that up and then work with each of the neighborhood reps. But for all of it, I think we need to really think hard about how we arrange these virtually. When can we plug into their meeting where it's going to be a larger audience of regular members? And when do we want to just meet with, I'm sure Department of Neighborhoods, we could meet with the neighborhood reps, collectively. But is that what we want to accomplish?
Also, just because we're talking about the neighborhoods, just remind everyone that most of the neighborhood groups go on break during the month of August because City Council does. And so based on our timeline, in which AJ will talk to us about as well.
Jennifer, you muted.
Okay, am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
Could you hear anything I just said?
No.
No. What I said was council.
After you said that the council goes on break.
Okay, great. Well, basically they go on break. So we have to be in August. So we have to think about that too in the way that we schedule and meet with them. A lot of the neighborhoods go on break. And depending on the schedule that we set, we have to think through that. So here's the order, because you all are putting your hands up. It's going to go Ragland, Reyes, Beckerly. So Board Member Ragland.
I agree with Eric. I don't think that we should separate this by region. I think our effort should go to meeting with all of them. And I think one way that we can take this a step further is not just by getting on the agenda for these, but for the long haul. We should be at least meeting quarterly with these area commissions, and not necessarily us, but following this, staff should be out as a part of our outreach and engagement effort, making sure that we're consistently on the agenda, reporting back on what it is that we're doing on the schools within their community. It's evident that in the past we've had a communications problem with the public, and so this could be a first step for us to show that we're a different board, that we're thinking differently about how we engage the community, and if we're meeting at least quarterly, giving them updates on what it is that's happening within the district. I think that that's a good nod towards our engagement effort. And so I would recommend that, but I agree with Eric. We should be aggressively pursuing getting on the agenda with each of them. Let's not give anybody short shrift on this.
Vice President Reyes.
So there's a couple of names missing on there. Some of our Hispanic groups, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, some of the other outreach organizations like BRAD, two of the ministerial and pastor alliances are missing, the Baptist Pastors Alliance, Interministerial Alliance. Probably that's my fault. I just got back. Children's Defense Fund. So there's a couple others that are not on the list yet, AJ, probably because I just met with you and I didn't get together with Misty, and I sent you the list and I didn't send it to Misty. So there's still a couple of them that are there. There's also an opportunity, maybe we can divide some of these by region and have 2 or 3 of us tackle it that way. Or, it is an extensive list and there's still some missing. So to meet the deadline, we're probably going to have to be somewhat creative for the first round. I think we need to allow ourselves some creativity on how we can gather as many as we can and get as much information as possible. Because just as we are all still working, some of our other folks are still working and juggling their COVID life. Thank you.
Yeah, and remember that too, some of the people on the list, some of the organizations on the list have a lot of contact already with our engagement. They're already engaged. So thinking about how do we address those that are super engaged versus those we want to engage may be good too. Board Member Beckerly.
I have a couple of organizations that I'd like to see on that I didn't get on, just Clintonville Go Public, Southside Stay, maybe Chris. Those 3 should be on too. And I was thinking maybe Rickenbacker Woods too. But the question I have for AJ would it mess up the process? And I'm not sure I see how it could, but it might. If we shared the questions ahead of time so people had time to think about it before we got there.
I don't think that's problematic at all.
All right, so that's one thought I have in terms of, especially because it's going to be Zoom and stuff, and it just seems to me that might be, in certain circumstances, might not make sense at all. And I love the idea of regularly going to the area commissions, James. I do think, though, that it probably should be us and not staff, unless we get a lot more staff, because I don't think we should be asking them to do any more. And electeds to electeds kind of makes more sense too.
Dr. Pierce, back to you.
I would just like us to be mindful of the focus and the emphasis of these meetings. A lot of our area commissions have education committees. There are chairs that lead those committees that regularly reach out to district administrators and board members as they see fit to help with various issues. So I think it's important for us to focus on the task at hand, which is delivering this message around our guardrails, our values, getting that information as effectively and as efficiently as possible so we can bring that back to start building our strategic plan for this upcoming year. Those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that is the whole purpose of the exercise, to make sure we have the right values. And as part of it too, we've talked about testing the portrait of a graduate values that came out of those working groups, and just making sure the community understands what those are as well. Because these processes are linked together. So we have to make sure that we keep saying that to ourselves, because they are linked together. And to Dr. Pierce's point, some of the area commissions do have education committees and other committees that, do work, and some don't. It just depends on how big they are and what area of town they are in, to be honest with you. So, maybe not also lumping them all together and creating a plan that really gets to what Eric was saying and James was saying, individual, their individual needs and the community needs. I see that we are giving a lot of ideas in the chat, so we'll make sure that those get on the list. Some of them are on the list though. I don't know if you guys all have the list. Misty sent it out before the board meeting, so look at that. But we'll make sure that all of those do get on there. It looks like there's no additional comments about this part, AJ, so I'll turn it back to you. Oh, Eric Brown.
Just very briefly, I think we need a couple of days at least to clean up and complete the list.
yeah.
Obviously, one of the things I'm seeing is that we're all stimulated by this list, thinking of others that are missing. And as we're identifying which ones we want to cover, we should also be adding, supplementing, cleaning it up. And we need, at least a couple days, perhaps till Friday, to do that.
Well, so AJ gave us until Friday to select. So why don't we say by Thursday at noon, we get all your additions to Misty and she will send it back out. And then Friday by 5 p.m., you put your name by the ones you are willing to go to. And then they will make the magic happen and tell us what we're assigned. Right, AJ?
So Jennifer, to your earlier point, there are over 200 partners of people who are engaged with Alicia Gillison's department. I will, a lot of these people that everyone's mentioning on the chat are already in that group. So to that point, I can distribute that or give it to Misty, or Misty can get it from Alicia. I don't know, we want to expand it, if we want to keep them separate and then figure out, again, they're already used to meeting on a regular basis. Do we call an extra meeting and then have us attend and walk them through? And that's a special meeting, especially just for all those groups. It includes all the pastors, it includes a lot of these bread, all of these other organizations already, and they already meet. So there's going to be some outliers that are not included in those meetings that perhaps that's where we need to add to ensure that we're inclusive of all the different organizations. So I think that might, because there's a lot of partners. We can be here all day and probably till the end of the year, adding more and more partners. And at some point, we probably need to get moving.
Yeah, that's exactly what my point was earlier, that we already have this mechanism and we do have a lot of partners that are engaged. And so perhaps we think of them differently or engage them differently in it than those that we know we need to actively get out and go do the outreach for. Board Member Beckley.
I think that that's a very practical way to do it. I would suggest if we do kind of go to the working level people that are representing our partners at the meetings with our engagement team, we send the questions out ahead of time for sure and have them speak for the whole organization. Because I would think that, sometimes it might be that the CEO or the director or whomever that would want to be able to answer those questions, or at least direct how they be answered, rather than just leave it up to the working, the person that comes to those working group meetings.
And in most cases, Carol, they are the CEOs, the directors, the education chair, things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So again, I'll send out the list you guys will be able to see. It's actually more completed than the list that we received.
Board Member Ragland.
Yeah, I really have to go on the record saying I don't necessarily like that type of top-down approach. Frankly, that is the way that we've always done things. We check all of these boxes with the CEO of this organization or the leader of that organization. And the people who send their kids to our district are the working class folks. They're the ones who we need to be meeting with. They're the ones we need to be communicating with more on a day-to-day basis. Oftentimes, we take a top-down approach. The leadership gets all of this, and then it gets lost in the wash. And the people who are really supporting us through their tax dollars and through sending their children to our districts are the ones that don't get the message. And if we continue to do all of that, we will have forsaken this entire process again, because we don't want to do the work and we don't want to touch the working class folks. I'm sorry, I can't stand for that type of approach any longer. It's the way that
that wasn't the proposal. The proposal
I'm not finished.
Okay,
I'm not
wait a
finished.
second.
I'm not
Let
finished.
Board
Thank
Member
you.
Ragland finish.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not finished.
Gotcha.
That's the way that we've always done things here. And the working class people are the ones that get the short shrift. all know how this goes. We check all of these boxes, and it's the ones that we think from our perch are worthy to get this information who always get it, and then it doesn't funnel down to the folks that are really the most supportive to us. We've got to stop that. We've said that we would stop it. We said that we would do the work necessary to make sure that the least of these are the ones that are getting the message that we want to deliver. The working class folks are our parents. They're the ones that are taking the risk with us. And we can't do this the same way that we've always done it.
So yes, I will get to Board Member Reyes, Beckerly, and Pierce. So I just want to remind you, James, I think we agree with you, and that's why we are doing this whole process. We started this conversation off talking about speaking to our neighborhoods directly. We also had, which is in our chat, but we've listed PTAs, PTOs, you know, getting down into it with the neighborhoods. I think the conversation shifted when we started to talk about, which your point is valid, about how our district engages on a bigger level, and how the goal of that engagement team is broken down into different parts. So we have our corporate engagement, that's what we were focused on, and then we have our family engagement. And so I think that that's where we were going in that moment in time. We agree with you. We don't want to do this as people perceive as being normal, right? We really want to get down into it to talk to the people that are most impacted. We'll come back to you. Can I come back to you? Okay, so it's going to be Reyes, Beckerly, Pierce, then back to Ragland.
Yeah, so I was not proposing to only meet with the CEOs and directors. My proposition was just to share the list, to look at who was missing, who was not missing. When AJ and I talked today, I mentioned there are parents and individuals that are not part of PTAs or any of these other groups. Some of our ESL parents, some of our other hard to reach folks. He and I talked about how do we actually go out, to your point, James, go out to those individuals that are not part of the Hispanic Chamber of Columbus. They're not part of the area commissions. So those are, I just wanted to ensure that you all have the list as we're thinking that we probably missed some as we're looking at, and we keep adding on the right side. Some of those names, I was saying some of those names are in that list. So we can add to that to our new list, or take away, have contact information, emails, maybe even some of the meeting dates to feed into this list. So it wasn't an exclusion of anything else.
Thank you. Board Member Beckerly, did you have something?
Yeah, I don't.
Okay, Dr. Pierce.
So Board Member Ragland, I think you've made a very valid point, but I think what you note is something that everyone in our community needs to deal with. It's the work that John Lewis and our great leaders have been engaged in, and that's connecting the working class people. What we're doing right now is really identifying those organizations that people are currently connecting to. But it's worthwhile to note that there are so many people in our community that are not connected to an organization, that are missing, and we need to pull them in to an organization that validates who they are and the work that they're doing. When we look at our strategic timeline, and we set this timeline out, we're literally looking at week 8 and week 9 to meet with all of these organizations. That's a 2-week span, about 4 to 5 days each week for 2 of us to go out and meet with these organizations. So again, I'm not saying that we need to focus on just the CEOs in our community, or just those influential people that get together and talk about what they need to do to keep people in the cycle of poverty. What we're saying is these are organizations that are currently meeting the needs of our community. How can we engage them to get some insights and inputs on, again, the values, the guards and the guardrails that we want to set? Do they align with our portrait of a grad? So let me be very clear. I'm not taking an elitist or a corporate approach. I understand the real need and necessity to connect everyone in our community to an organization that is dedicated to fighting racial and social injustices.
Board Member Ragland.
With all due respect, I've been following this district for over 20 years. This is precisely how we've done it in the past, and it's precisely the process that has led us to the communication problem that we have right now. We need to make sure that we're meeting everyone's needs, not just those that are at the top level of our society. And I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to AJ.
So the good news is this debate is easily settled. You all have access to the list. You have until noon Thursday to add anything that you feel like should be added to the list. And then you have until end of business on Friday to submit which groups and organizations you're willing to go to. And so instead of having this conversation right now, we will know fairly clearly come Saturday morning exactly how much work this team of individuals is or is not willing to do. And so I would say defer the rest of this conversation until we have that data in front of us. And then we'll figure out, are you all about the business of doing the community engagement or are you not? But we'll see, and the facts will bear that out. Before we transition, I want to give folks any other, as you go through that long list, and it's a lengthy list, and I've been checking in with Misty, and she's typing furiously to try to keep up with the conversation. You've got great staff. Make sure you take care of her. So that if you have any questions about any items on that list that would help you in making your decision, now is a great time to ask them before we transition. Right now, we're talking about who we'll be talking to. In a moment, we're going to transition to what we'll be talking about. But any other questions about this list so that you can be successful in getting your homework into Misty by end of business Friday? Any other questions about the list? Yeah. You're muted.
I just want to make sure when I thought about this, I said, I was thinking both external community, but also internal community. So I put down things like teachers, principals, social workers. Is that all appropriate?
So
within the district, like employees.
So anytime you put something on this list that is not an organization, so this is intentionally a list of organizations. So you can put things on there that are not organizations if you want. The way I'll interpret those on the list as requests for you to host a meeting for that group specifically. So if you put custodial staff on the list, unless I can connect that to a specific organization, maybe there is a bargaining unit that's just custodians. Unless I can connect that to a specific organization, then I'll assume that what you're trying to do is recommend that there be some type of engagement session specifically for that group of individuals.
That is what I'm trying to do. So that's perfect. Like in the case of teachers, it might have to go through the union, but yes, exactly. Thank you.
Other questions for clarity about the list? Thank you for that question, Carol. Other questions for clarity before we move on? All right, as you have more, don't hesitate to email Misty and I will be your eager scribes trying to keep track of all this as we go. So I want to switch now to your engagement and outreach guide. So if you jump over to that document instead, want to walk through this. Again, the intention of this document was to capture the collective feedback I received from each of you when we spoke over the past about 7 to 10 days. The first thing that was clear to me as I was visiting with each of you is that we need to be on the same page in terms of what words mean. So different people were using words in different ways. So for example, between I think the 8 of you I visited with, I probably heard about 3 different definitions of equity. So I might want to add that to our definitions list. But the way you all spoke to me, that is an example of a word that was being used in very different ways. So what I have here are words that I've also heard you all use in very different ways. And so what I tried to do is capture what I heard from you all and what I bring to the conversation and come up with a set of definitions that articulate what do we mean when we use these particular words. And again, I should have put equity on here because it came up so frequently, so I'll add that. So what I'm proposing is that when we say these words, this is what they mean. My request then is take a moment to read through the definitions. And then if you have questions about what any of these meanings, this would be a great time to bring that up, because these are all words that are likely to come up in the engagement and outreach work that you're doing. And so when two of you are on this side of town and somebody asks you what is a goal, those community members should get the exact same answer as if two of you are on this side of town and somebody asks you what a goal is. So take a moment and look through the list of definitions. And this is the time. What questions do you have about any of these meanings? Because I can certainly work with you now to try to clean some of these up, make them more clear. What questions do you have? Yeah, Dr. Pierce.
So one, I just have to say, I appreciate this list of definitions. To have a common language is very important. So thank you for having the due diligence and the forethought to put this together. Is it possible that we could put strategic plan on there? I think when we go out into the community and we talk about strategic plans, that has different meaning to different people.
Yeah, it's a great one to add. And by the way, this is the reason that I use Google Docs for these things, because then we can have a living document. I don't have to send everybody a new update. If you want to know the current, just go look at the document. It's always the most current version. And so I'll work to add in a definition for strategic plan. And again, because I heard it so frequently, I will add the term equity in here as well and offer a definition.
Board Member Brown.
Yeah, very quickly, I think, on the third item, portrait of a graduate.
Yes.
I guess my question is whether we're talking about specifically the outcome of the working group that developed portrait of a graduate with Patel, or are we talking about something new that we will be adopting and the board will work on probably using that as a starting point?
Yeah, so when I have visited with each of you, my understanding is that the portrait of the graduate that was developed last fall, last winter, essentially serves as this visionary document. It says, we're not here today, but what we want for 100% of the students we serve is this. And that's what the portrait of the graduate is intended to describe. Is that even though that is not true for 100% of our students today, that as an organization, we are not there yet. That's why I described it as a visionary statement. It doesn't describe the existing reality. It describes where we aspire to be over the next 15 years. It's a long-term visionary document. And it says, here's what students should know, and here's what they should be able to do if we've done our job for the 13 years we have them. That's why it's 15 years out. Is over the course of 13 years that you entrusted your children with us, here are the things they should know and be able to do. And that's our visionary statement. And then the purpose of having goals is we need to identify over the next 5 years, what progress will we make toward causing Columbus City Schools to be ever closer to fulfilling on that visionary statement. And so we say, here's our long-term vision. Here's where we want to get to. Here's what we want students to know and be able to do. We aren't there yet, but we're going to take this a bite at a time. So over the next 5 years, we're going to get here. And over the next 5 years, we're going to get here. And over the next 5 years, we're going to get here. And so what we're doing, in fact, is we're going out to the community and say, what should we be focused on for the next 5 years in order to get us closer to actually being able to fulfill on this promise for every single student when they walk across that stage. That is what I heard from you all when I visited with you.
All right, and just to clarify, we engaged, there was a process underway here in the district with Patel this year during mostly the spring with about 150 people involved that came up with a portrait, and that's going to be published. If I hear you right, you're not referring specifically to that, but you're referring more generally to.
No, I'm referring specifically to that document.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, my understanding is they started this process, the district started working with Battelle last fall in this process and completed that process this spring. And that is what now comes forward. It says, okay, now we have an idea of what we want to accomplish, but that is a ways off. We aren't going to accomplish that tomorrow. So we think that over the generation, our children coming to us today, when they graduate, here's what we're going to be able to accomplish. And every year, we're going to get closer and closer to that. And our goals are how we will measure that we're getting closer to actually accomplishing that portrait.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Board Member Beckerly, then Vice President Reyes.
I just have a quick question. I think it's actually for Dr. Dixon. I know we've gotten to the point with the portrait of the graduate work that we have the competencies. Do we actually, I mean, is there anything more that's left to do, or are the competencies our vision? I mean, are we there? Do we have a vision statement, or are they just the competencies? Oh, you're
sorry, they're just the competencies. So
okay,
remember,
good.
we're going to get this out to make sure. I think that's the exercise that you guys are going to do.
Right.
Make sure that we heard confirmation of that work is the step that you guys are going to do. Yeah.
So then, we would be saying to these people, these are the 5 top competencies that our portrait of a graduate effort identify, and we want to reach all of them in 15 years. And then,
yeah. So Carol, Board Member Beckerly, if you look at the guide, actually, we're going to get down to the questions that we're asking, and that's part of it. Yeah. So maybe pause on that and let's get down there for him to explain it. Vice President Reyes.
Thank you. So the only comment or question that I have is, as I'm looking at the list, I'm just, so some of the organizations I suggested have predominantly Spanish-speaking members. So I'm trying to look if all these terms are translate correctly, or there's words for those in that particular language. And then I'm thinking about Spanish. I'm sure there's going to be other language, like when we go to ETTS or some of those other organizations. I'm really thinking of our ESL population. Is there any way that we can get somebody to kind of look at some of these terms? And I'm talking about, I mean, I know that maybe like guard rails might be something that be not easy to translate.
Well, the terms, well, obviously the public can see them. I think the point is more for us, right? So that we have a common language.
Right, but we'll have to explain it to the community. So a lot of times what I find myself doing when I translate and when I go out and talk about things that have to do with the school board, you have to go a little bit deeper, because remember, we're talking about engaging some people that are not the typical folk that hear what board policy means. I say board policy in a room of our Latino parents, some of our ESL first generation. They're going, what is board policy? I just send my kid to school. So I'm just wondering if there's, and maybe I'm thinking too far, but I'm thinking if I go to some of these communities from a Latino perspective, Spanish speaker, there are some words that may not have direct translations. So we may have to be very cognizant of making sure that we might have to describe the definition itself versus using the actual word. But just I don't know who's going to have ETTS. I don't know who's going to have some of those other organizations that have particularly non-English dominant members. So just putting that out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, always with translation of information. So we can definitely look at that. I think that was everyone. Did anyone else have a question? Okay, back to you, AJ.
All right, then we'll back into the same conversation. We're looking through the definitions. Any other questions about the definitions or any other terms that need to be added that directly relate to the strategic planning process? And certainly you can always contact me later as you think of stuff outside of this setting. But again, my aspiration is for you to be successful in this community engagement work, community outreach work. And one way that you will be unsuccessful is if you are all giving very different answers to the exact same fundamental basic questions. And so by having this list of definitions, part of my request is that each of you spend time reading through them, familiarizing yourself with them. And don't be shocked if I break out some old school pop quiz in the middle of a board meeting, knowing this stuff is live on YouTube, and be like, all right, so board member such and such, how would you define a goal? Just to figure out if y'all ready for prime time or not. And so just fair warning, I will come incorrect in this manner and expect you to just be ready. But this is a way of just constantly trying to figure out how to set you up for the maximum amount of success so that when you all do have these conversations that you can have them effectively. So those are the definitions. Again, as you have other ideas, just shoot me an email or whatever. But I'm saying it jokingly, but I am super not joking. I will hit you up with some random, fill in the blank questions. Hey, how would you define this term? And then we'll figure out who read this and really studied on it so that you can be ready to work with your community. Next, we go to the timeline. We discussed and really finalized on this last time, but I just wanted to bring this back just to make sure we're all still on the same page. The portrait of graduate work started all the way back in the fall. They did complete the spring, the developing that. Over the next several months, you all will be involved in these community engagement and outreach sessions. Based on the feedback that I got from you all, it sounds like there are likely to be 2 to 6 engagement sessions that you all specifically host where you're inviting people to come to, but it sounds like the bulk of what you all collectively were interested in doing is going to where the people are. And I just want to say, I applaud that. I think sitting around waiting for people to come to you is just not an effective strategy for the quality of engagement that I think that you all have expressed that you want. And so having more sessions rather than fewer does make sense to me. But again, it is a lot of work on you all because you'll have to actually be doing the work. And then one of the things that you all said last time we connected is that you wanted a way for the people to be able to submit information online, and so work with your staff, to try to identify what is a way that people could go somewhere and be responsive to the questions that you were asking in person, where was a way that they could contribute online if they didn't make it to an engagement or outreach session. The intention is that we'll have a rough draft in October. It'd really present that publicly and be able to say, here's where we think we're landing based on the feedback that we've received from the community. In November, to be able to actually adopt that so that December, January, February, and March, your superintendent can actually develop the implementation plan. It says, the board has said what we need to accomplish. And now here's a plan for how I will lead our staff toward accomplishing this over the next 5 years. And so that sets her up in order to have that done by March, which was important to you all, so that this plan could be a driver of the budget for the next for SY 21-22. So just checking in, is that the timeline that folks recalled? Any questions about that timeline? All right, good. So then the resources needed. This came up because the question was, what are the tools that we'll have when we go out? And so there are 4 key things that we're using today's feedback to create. The script, which we're going to walk through the feedback you've given so far in a moment. Once we have the script finalized, then I'll be able to put together a rough draft slideshow. So if there is slideshow capability, then you could use it. If there's not, then don't. A handout. So whether or not there's slideshow capability, a handout that is available to be left with people so they have more information. And then finally, a capture document. There has to be a way for you all to, as board members, to be capturing the feedback you're hearing from the community and then providing all of that back so that we can include it in the larger body of input that we're receiving. And then I'll work with your team to mine through all of the information that was captured and then come back to you all with, okay, here here in some organized or analyzed fashion is the feedback you received. Now let's talk about how you want to digest this feedback and turn it into an actual set of goals and guardrails. And so that's what those 4 resources are. What questions do you have about these 4 resources? Yeah.
Member Brown.
Yes, very specifically, and tying back to what I'd mentioned earlier, I think we need to make sure we have something that we can use online, that we have to deliberately create something different than what we do in person, if we ever get to an in-person meeting with anybody, and have a good visual and plan for how we do this online.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So you mean online? I'm thinking of that 2 ways. One, online as a virtual meeting,
Yeah,
but
he's
2, as a
suggesting virtual meeting.
passive online that people could then go do the survey or whatever to capture there.
We may
Yeah.
want to consider both, but I was talking about virtual meetings.
Yeah, he was talking about virtual meetings. Up above in the timeline, when it talks about board leading, community engagement, and outreach sessions, when it says online feedback form, that's it's contemplated, because this is what you all said last time, that's something that you want. So we'd have to create that. But these particular resources absolutely need to be designed with the assumption that a large percentage of the time you're likely going to be delivering it in the same way that we're having this conversation right now. And so, yeah, yes, Eric, that'll be inherent in the design. I thought I saw another question or comment about these 4 resources.
Dr. Pierce.
So my question relates to training. As we talk about the visual slideshow being available, I don't want to assume that we'll have a staff member with us to share our screens. Is it possible that we could be provided, the board members that need it, with a very quick training on Zoom, how to share their screen and how to go through the slideshow?
Misty, that's all you. You will have to educate your board members. Good luck on that.
She's
Maybe we can try to pair up.
already done it.
Yeah, maybe we'll pair up also for some of us that are a little bit more proficient.
Well, and that is one of the benefits, that there will always be 2 of you for any of these. So you'll never be solo. So you don't all have to know what you're doing. You just have to have a friend who knows what they're doing.
And you know, Tina knows how to do it. You know, Dr. Pierce, you know it.
Y'all overworking me. Nah, I got babies. I got a husband.
Other questions about the resources needed? Or are you all seeing any other resources that you might need? All right, so just as a heads up, before we unleash you into the wild, we will have a session like this where we will just role play through these sessions so that you have some actual experience seeing it done and doing it yourself, so that we can norm around what it looks like to lead this conversation. So we will do a practice session before you all go out in pairs and start doing live sessions. So if you have kind of any nervousness around the degree of preparation, we will, again, the goal is to set you up for success. We'll make sure you have the readiness that you need.
Vice President Reyes.
So I'm going to go back to my ESL example. Sorry, I keep on harping on this, but sometimes we miss this particular group. Dr. Dixon or anybody, would we have access to any of our interpreters or even some of our sign language interpreters if we make maybe 1 or 2 specific meetings with groups that may have multiple languages? I mean, I would hope we could get to those groups and say, hey, you know what you need. Do you have interpreters? And if we need something other than what they have, would we have access to any type of either sign language and or other language interpreters?
Yes, these meetings would be virtual meetings. Am I correct? Yes.
Some of them will be, but some of if there is a group that is choosing to meet in person in a socially distanced way, you all will have to make the decision: are you going to go to that group or not? So say the I think somebody mentioned the Baptist ministers. So say the ministers decide that they want to get together in person for a prayer breakfast, and that's the one you were going to attend. You all will have to make the decision. Are the two of you going to attend that in person, or are you going to skip it and only do virtual ones? But my coaching to you is, if you say you're going to show up, you need to be prepared to show up in the manner that works for the people that you're trying to connect with, not necessarily in the manner that works for you. And I just think you need to be prepared for that.
Thank you. So I just think to that point, if you need any other people to accompany you, I think it would be best if we do it via Zoom so we can schedule those people that way. So just let us know, Ramona, and then we will work with our team to make sure on those dates that we have people as they are available.
And I have seen some school systems that have done joint in-person virtual sessions so that there are people who are physically in the room. In fact, I was participating in one just last week. So there are people who are physically in the room, and then there are people who are connected via Zoom. And so part of the benefit of that is it would make interpretation a lot easier if you had a wide variety of languages that you needed to cover, because you could just create a Zoom for each different language that needs to be covered. So I have seen that done. I hadn't seen it before, but people are getting creative at it. You'll figure it out. Other questions about resources? All right, then let's dive into the script overview. Script, there are two main parts of the script. There's the opening, and then there's the listening. When I visited with you all said that you clearly wanted the vast majority of the time spent on the listening. This is also why there's a script, because handing an elected official a microphone can be as dangerous as handing a pastor a microphone. Like, you might just mess around and catch a sermon you weren't expecting. And so this is the reason that we've got a script, and this is the reason why I wanted to be clear that it was you all who said you wanted to limit the opening time. So this will be a little bit different for you, because I know, if you all are anything like me, you've kind of already got your routine, and as an elected official, when it's time to show up, you got the things that you normally say and all that. Probably toss all that out. What we're going to do is, reach consensus around what are the opening messages, and then that will be what folks do. And your temptation will be, to kind of go back to what you've practiced and you have the most experience with, whether it's during campaigning or since then. And this is part of the reason why there will always be two of you, so that when you are tempted, somebody else will snatch the apple from your teeth and get you back on script. That is how this is going to work. But again, that's why the opening is so short, because I know there's some variation in how short or long people thought it would be. The consensus was, it should be around 10 to 15% of the time max, so that you can reserve 85 to 90% of the time to actually listen to what they have to say, rather than to show up and deliver whatever message you want people to have. And then there will be a brief closing. I think it makes sense as a closing, to summarize what just happened, what people should expect next, and to thank people for their time. But all of that, if it takes more than 60 seconds, you did it wrong. So what I want to focus on then is the key opening messages. This is my attempt to synthesize the things that all of you shared. The good news is all of you basically were hovering around a lot of the exact same, conversation. And so these are the key messages that seem to be repeated over and over. So let's start with key opening messages. I tried to summarize it into 3 bullets. What questions or comments do you have about the 3 bullets for the key opening messages? Take a moment to read those, and then this is our opportunity to talk through these and try to get an idea of what exactly it is. Are these the key messages that you want to reach consensus around? Whenever we do have consensus on what the key opening messages should be, then I'll take that and create a full-blown script that's literally, word for word for word, what you want to say. So this isn't, we're not yet at the script. We're just at the key messages from which the script will be built. So first, key opening messages, questions or comments about those?
I would say just instead of putting expiring, can we say we're revisiting? Can we give it more of a positive
Yeah,
tone?
got it. I'm literally taking notes. I don't know if you can see the notes that I'm taking, but that's what's happening.
I agree with Tina as far as changing expiring to something more positive, but I think that we still need to talk about this being change. Clearly, that's part of the message.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
Other comments about the key opening messages? So we're trying to create the context, welcome people in the space, let them know what we're doing here, what the intention is.
Should we add a sentence just to clarify that we won't be discussing certain things at the meeting?
So so in my original key opening messages, I actually had exactly that. Right before the here's a handout that describes our process. The original third bullet out of 4 was what we ain't gonna do. However, I took it out because I was wondering if the guided questions would be enough to keep folks on track, but and so I was being aspirational. But if we need to put that back in, yeah, I have no problem. But yeah, it was in the original draft. Thoughts about this? So we put that back in. You know, a sentence says, you know, let me also define what we're not here to, because that's what the original did. Said what we're not here to do is this, this, is this. Instead, we're going to focus on this. Essentially said when if your kid didn't get a part in the play, we're not here to discuss that. Like it was that kind of thing.
I think that's a great idea. And then also maybe we can have either in the slide deck or in part of the handout ways that they can communicate back to the district. So if they do have a question, like, your question is really important. It's just that's not what we're using our time to discuss. Here's how you connect with us.
I like that. Great feedback. Any other thoughts on the key opening messages? All right, that takes us to the questions. This is where it got really hard because your questions were much more diverse than your opening message. Your opening message, there was a lot of consensus, but your questions were a lot harder. So what I try to do is think, what are open-ended as opposed to yes, no answers? What are open-ended questions that were specific enough to drive the conversation in a productive direction, but broad enough that whatever people had on their heart, they'd have a space with which to communicate it. So that was the challenge that I tried to accomplish with synthesizing all of your feedback around questions. Take a moment to look at the key listening questions, and let's talk about it.
So AJ, you're saying this could be anywhere from probably no more than an hour for each session?
I think you should, depending on whether it's an outreach or engagement session, I think the script I delivered to you is going to be designed to be flexible for anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours. And for your engagement sessions where you're hosting, those will be on the longer end, 90 to 120 minutes just by default. But some of these groups are not going to give you 2 hours. And so you need to have something that you can get meaningful feedback from them in whatever amount of time they do give you. And so I'm going to nudge you to try to push that to half an hour, but having gone through this process before, some groups are going to be like, we got you for 5 minutes. And you're going to have to push, to get to 30 minutes. I don't think you'll be able to get anything meaningful from folks in less than 30 minutes. And so in that situation, if a group says we are unwilling to give you 30 minutes, then I would refer them to either one of the engagement sessions that you are hosting or to the online form where they can fill that out kind of in their own time. But I don't see any way that you're going to be able to have a real conversation that isn't just placating people in less than 30 minutes. And frankly, it'll be hard to do it in less than an hour and a half.
And the reason I ask is I think we have to be probably very forthcoming with each of the organizations that we reach out to and let them know that, you know, we've got 5 or 6 questions. If we agree at the end of this conversation that these are the questions and that they're open-ended, just because I've sat in many other groups where we have people that like to talk a lot and may take 15 minutes just to respond to one question. And, you know, I think we've all been in that situation where we've had to cut people off and say, you know, we're going to not have commentary. We're just trying to get, you know, scribble on a piece of paper or whatever. So in this conversation, do we want to also select, if we only have 30 minutes, are there 3 questions that we definitely want to have answers to, and then the rest we get in paper? Maybe I'm going here.
Yeah, so the directions you'll see in the script suggest that you start with the first question and you go until you run out of time with the intention of trying to get through at minimum the first 2, preferably the first 5. But then there will be a few additional kind of drill down questions. If all you have is half an hour, you won't be able to do any of the drill down questions. So you'll just do main question 1, main question 2, main question 3. You got 2 hours, you do main question 1, drill down, main question 2, drill down. But those directions will all be in the script. And so if you have more time, you'll see how the script accordions out. And if you have less time, you'll see how the script collapses down.
Perfect. So it is in order of importance. Perfect. Thank you.
And I think it goes back to something Board Member Beckerly said, I think it was Board Member Beckerly, about giving the questions prior to going so that people can also think about them to be more efficient with time.
Yeah, but you know, some of these organizations, we have some people that like to take the first answer, and it's
absolutely. And so it is about keeping and maintaining control and really understanding and pushing them to say, you know what, we have 5 very important questions we really want to ask you because your opinion is very valuable to us, and level setting them before we get started. But they might not. So then we have other tools to gather that information. And then also if we have the online tool, we can say, and now you go promo that to your constituency and have people go do the online tool, and so we can gather even more. So it's all just about maintaining the control of that limited time. But yes, we know. So Board Member Brown, then Dr. Pierce.
Thank you. This section has finally reminded me with these how, and at least for me, you may each have different, well, I know everybody has different abilities, but listening carefully and taking notes for me are 2 different things. And I generally do a terrible job taking notes when I'm really paying attention, having a conversation and trying to listen. My suggestion, there's a couple of ideas. One is that we might enlist college students or somebody else as interns to go with us to help take notes. Secondly, we will be in teams of 2 so that we can divide those things up if we don't have somebody else to take notes. 3, and this is both a curse and a blessing, doing these in virtual meetings that potentially can be recorded gives us something to go back to, but the idea of going back and listening all over again is not necessarily how I want to spend a lot of time. But I think we need to address that. If nobody else has difficulty, then it's just my issue, fine. But
and so this is where the madness is fully revealed. There are plenty of ways to make your lives easier. I recommend we employ none of those. The actual intention is that you all, as the elected officials, are doing the listening and doing whatever capturing is necessary. this is part of the reason you do have, you are in pairs. So one of you could lead one question while the other captures, then you can switch off. And so you all can do it however you want. But I actually don't recommend that you do anything to like bring other people in or try to do recordings. Like there is, what I'm suggesting to you is that there is actually value in your constituents having the experience of having been served by you. And that is a value that I don't want you to miss out on. So are there easier ways to accomplish this? Yes, there are. And if you all choose to employ them, you can. But what I would encourage you is just to consider there is truly something powerful. I think of this, the idea of Jesus washing the feet. Like there's something powerful about you as the public servant demonstrating that servant leadership by being of service to them and doing what may be thought of, well, this is the grunt work. Well, you are the grunt on their behalf. Let's put that in action. And so that's why this is my recommendation. And so, for example, when I lead public meetings, I take all my own notes in my own public meetings as well for this exact reason. I certainly did that as when I was an elected official, and in my time as a public official, when I've had to lead large public meetings, even when I'm being screamed at and they're more kind of hostile, less pleasant than what you'll be experiencing. That I'm like, oh yes, ma'am, I heard you say that we're all idiots and you wish that we stopped screwing things up. Did I hear you correctly? All right, hold on, let me get that. And I would capture whatever was said, and so that is my recommendation. So you all collectively can choose to do it differently, but that is the method to the madness of why I recommended you go in pairs and to be responsible for your own capture.
I appreciate the explanation and that perspective. I just have a background working with court reporters, and it all gets captured. Thank you.
Yes, there are people who are vastly more competent at this task than you are. That is correct. Yeah, in any other circumstance, it makes perfect sense to utilize the people who actually have skill in this area. Other questions or comments about the key questions? Yeah.
Dr. Pierce.
Thank you so much. So my questions are, my suggestion, I think at this point is, can we focus the middle three as top priority questions? What should we start doing that we're not yet doing? What are we doing right now that's not working and should be stopped? And then that last question, what is working that should not be changed? In that particular order. I think the other questions, like in which area of the portrait of the grad is CCS most achieving today, we can get at that through those three questions.
Got it. Any thoughts about that?
I agree with that. And I think that there's ways, like in the handout, they will get what the portrait of graduate areas are, right? So hopefully they'll just look at that, and then that will also inform some of their answers. So I agree with that.
I heard you say what should be stopped, what should be started, what should not be changed. Was that the order you suggested?
Can we start with what should be started that we're not currently doing?
What should be started?
Stopped that we're currently doing, and what is
what
working?
Should not be changed. Got it.
If I may, I think we should end with the final question. Given what you shared, what is the one thing you would be open to doing in support of our students? I think that's absolutely, to me, that's a closing piece. So you, of course, have the engaging piece of making an ask, but you have to have a closing piece that I think is very student focused and putting an onus back on the community. So we must include that last question, I believe, last.
Yeah, a few of you brought up this point of, if we're going to be in front of people, how can we draw them into partnership with and collaboration with what we're doing to be transformative in the lives of our scholars? And so I tried to capture, several of you said it in different ways, but this was my attempt to capture. And I absolutely agree that I think that's a great closing question. It's like, okay, so we've talked about all this. if you're fired up about what's possible for our students and what we're collectively going to do, what part in that transformation do you want to play? I think that's absolutely a powerful way to close out the question. Other reflections or thoughts on the key listening questions?
Dr. Pierce?
Is it possible that with that question, we could give them maybe commitment cards that they fill those out and we could collect those and bring them back to the district? And maybe we could give them to public engagement, community engagement, but I would love if we could do that. Sorry, Doctor.
You know, so I actually, one of the things that we did when I was board chairs, we went out and door knocked. It was in between election cycles, so nobody was running for anything. And that's what was unique about the door knocking. There's a whole bunch of elected officials and community volunteers knocking and not trying to get elected, and not trying to get a bond passed. And what we did is we shared information about what was happening with the school system and really some of the transformations we were going through. Kind of basically, we had a front door town hall that lasted for a full month. We knocked on, it was like 55,000 doors over that month. But one of the things we did in the script, the very last thing in the script was inviting people to be mentors, tutors, or volunteers. And over the course of knocking on 55,000 doors, we had 3,000 people sign up to be mentors and tutors to students in the district. And so, yeah, I think inviting people in and giving them a tangible way to be a contribution to our scholars, I think that's powerful, and I've seen people really respond to that invitation. So yeah, I added that as a note as one of the other resources. Then is we need to create some type of commitment card or a link to a commitment card that if people want to get personally invested in the lives of our young people, do we offer a pathway to that? Other questions or comments about listening questions? All right, and then finally, kind of the closeout message. It's pretty straightforward stuff, but anything else that needs to be in the closing message? Any key messages that need to be offered in the closing with an eye towards what can be done inside of 60 seconds? All right, so that's the nature of the work. It sounds like we've got clarity about what our next steps are. The next steps are, I've got a whole bunch of revisions to do on this document. My commitment is I will have those revised by end of business tomorrow, so that after 5 p.m. tomorrow, you'll be able to check back to this document and see the revisions that are made. If you have any questions or comments about it at that point, feel free to reach out to me. We can talk through it. In addition, I'll need to take this script overview and then turn it into a rough draft of an actual, just literally word by word, line by line script. And so I'll get started on that. Once I won't even bother with the slideshow, the other things right now. The script is first, and then once you have that, then everything else is built off of that. What you all have to do next is by noon tomorrow, you need to get any updates to the spreadsheet. I saw some really great comments in the chat box, so I want to dig into those right quick. One was, can there be a column in the spreadsheet that describes whether this is an outreach group or an engagement session? And I actually like that idea. And so, Misty, if I could impose upon you, if you could take the first step, because most of these are organizations, so they seem to be automatically targeted for outreach that the board wants to go to them. But if you could take the first stab and then let me know, and then I can work with you, we can run through it again and try to add an indication of whether we think this is recommended for an outreach session or something that we need to host a special session and bring people to us for it. And so I actually like that recommendation. I'll work with your staff on that. And I thought I saw something else about I don't see it. The other big recommendation that came up, Ramona highlighted the need for materials that have been translated. I completely agree. And so I'll just, put on my to-do list that is, once we have the final version of everything, that then reach back out to staff. It sounds like Dr. Dixon has some people on the team who then could support us with translation. The good news is we're not talking about a lot. We're basically talking about translation for a slideshow, a handout, and now a commitment card are basically the three items that, and whatever the online feedback form is. So those four things, it sounds like are the things that would need to be translated. But I can, once we've finalized everything in English, then I'll work with the team to make sure that we have appropriate translations for it in whatever other languages. Also, if any of you could, please add a note into the spreadsheet when you're filling it out. If you feel like you need interpreters at a given meeting, and which languages you think are likely to be needed. So as you're filling it, whether you are signing up for it or not, that's irrelevant. If it is a session that you think that interpretation will be necessary, please indicate that. If we could, Misty, create one more column in addition to one, a column for indicating whether it's an outreach or engagement session. And let's have another column that indicates if there's a language that's needed other than English. So if it's just English, then just leave it blank. But if you can already identify that this session, there's no way it can possibly be successful without having interpretation on this language available if needed, then that needs to be indicated. And so if you don't know, then I'd leave it blank. But if you are absolutely confident that this session could not be accomplished effectively without having interpretive services, then indicate that as such. So I think I captured all of our next steps. Anyone else? Are there next steps that I missed?
I just wanted to throw in, Madam President and Mr. Crable, I just wanted to throw in again that we make sure we identify, classify the particular organization. I think it's very helpful to know whether this is a corporate entity, a community-based organization, a faith-based organization, so on and so forth. I think that also helps us create an opportunity for ourselves to say, hey, maybe we can meet with this particular group in an outreach or an engagement opportunity in a more group or focus group kind of setting. So I think that's important too, to add that tab.
Member Brown?
Yes, thank you. I think similarly, many of us have information or insight into the groups or the individuals that are part of these groups that would be useful for those two board members who will do the presentation. Sometimes that board member will be the one that signs up to do it, but not always. And I think that we may need a place on that spreadsheet to share that, or at least to indicate, please touch base with me before you do this one, so that I can fill you in, something of that sort. Because those insights that the seven of us have, can be very useful as we go out and talk to folks that are invested in stakeholders.
So what I hear Eric describing is that there are going to be times when board members have particular insight into an organization, but won't be, because of a conflict of schedule, won't be able to sign up for that one in particular. And essentially what I hear is yet another column, Mr. Gonna make you regret being at this particular meeting. Yet another column, once just generically for notes. So that board members either have a note that you want to include in the document to your colleagues who might be attending, or then put the note in there in the notes column, or it could be that you just want them to contact you in advance of going to that, so you can share with them. Then put that, please contact Eric, when you go to visit this group. So either the note, like this group, everyone in this group is allergic to pineapples. Don't bring pineapple to this group. So you could just put a note like that. And so we've got another column as you have notes go ahead and fill those in. And so then when you send it to when everybody sends their updated spreadsheets to Misty, she can then combine all those, and people will have the benefit of those notes before you go out.
Yeah, that's exactly it, and I apologize to Misty, but you know, because this spreadsheet itself is a public document, there may be a number of places where we put please touch base with me, so that we can watch out for this person or something of the sort.
Yeah, let me just, out of an abundance of caution, clarify. My coaching to you, never put anything in writing that you don't want on the front page of the paper. So if you want people to call you, if you want people to call you, just put a note in there to have them call you. Any other questions about next steps before we go ahead and wrap this thing up? Any other next steps? All right, so you all have your homework. I have my homework. We are moving with haste. We are not, I appreciate that you are not interested in taking a slow road on this, that y'all are ready to get to work. And so we will keep it moving. Currently, your staff put together, a timeline, and we are cranking away on that timeline. I have watched many a board put together a timeline and then fall off. You all, conversely, in the middle of a global pandemic, stay on hustle. And so I love the hustle in you. Keep it coming. There's a lot more work ahead. Madam President, back to you.
Thank you. We are on a mission. We have lots of work to do, pandemic or no pandemic, right? Yeah, so that's where we are. So board members, I think you know where what our homework is. Make sure we're ready for our quizzes on the definitions next time we see AJ. And we will get those updates to Misty by Thursday at noon. She will add the columns, and maybe we could put that, Misty, can you pop up on screen? I hate that we're talking to you and we can't see you. I invite you to please turn your camera on for a moment. Maybe we can put that in a shared drive so we can all kind of watch, because I also don't want to, we're trying to do this quickly. And so if we have comments and things, we can all just see what we're doing. So maybe we can throw that into the Google Drive. And then on by Friday, Friday at 5, we will put our names by the places, people we are willing to go talk to, right? Excellent. All right. Any other final thoughts or questions? Okay, well, I don't see any. Oh, Stan came back right on time. All right, then I will have a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I motion that we adjourn our board retreat.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
Vice President Reyes?
Thank you, AJ and everybody. Yes.
President Adair?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good meeting, guys.
Good night. Thank you, AJ. Great job. Great job, everybody.
Hey, Michael, can you email me the latest equity draft?
I certainly can.
Thank you, sir.
Right.
I got it on.
Yes. I love that book.
Dr. Pierce.
Oh, look at you. Guy, you got the Adams book. Yeah.
Right, we ready.
Look, man, people dangerously literate out in these streets. I love it. No, as you all read through those, if you want to call and talk through them, I'm always happy to nerd out about some of the reading resources that are out there. There's good stuff. Expand the mind.
Yeah.
Good night,
Y'all be
everybody.
blessed.
Bye.